Thank you. I've come prepared with my pack of slides. I thought that what you would really want after a day like this is a whole bunch of slides to read, so I prepared them and I've kept them where they deserve to be. I don't actually like slides anyway. So we live in an age and a time when living with a segment of one is possible. We can get so much information about individuals. If you look at me right now, I've got a band on one hand and a watch on the other connected up to my phone. Everything I do is sort of auto-dated, timestamped, geolocated, identified. Quantifying the self has never been hard. It's become a lot easier in the world we live in. So, if with that kind of information I tried to decide what I wanted to talk to you guys about, it would mean doing quite a lot of research about the different industries you're in, your personal interests, why you've come to this conference, your geography, your culture, and then try and come up with one message for all of that. And I thought long and hard about it and said, actually, that's going to go exactly where the PowerPoint went. Since I can't possibly come up with a message that's going to make sense or value to all of you, all I can do, because David Weinberg, one of my friends, said the smartest person in the room is the room. Yeah. Okay? So I'm not going to compete against the room. You guys have all worked in technology. I've been there 33 years. I know little bits about it. So if I can spend the next 25 minutes just talking to you about how I view that world, then perhaps before dinner it's going to give you something to talk about during dinner, something to nobble me over after dinner. I'll stay here for a while and then I have to get back. So here goes a random walk into my views on technology. I got interested in technology because I heard something that really upset me, that I could belong to the first generation. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm a pacer, I'm not a good stander. I learned that I could belong to the first generation whose children may not live as long as I did. Okay? That's straight fact. Human beings, every generation has lived longer than the previous generation. Right? Many of us in this room, I'm probably the oldest in the room. I'm not the smartest, but definitely, knocking there for the oldest. We're going to be in a situation where our children may not live as long as we are. And that's going to be for a variety of reasons. Reasons related to nutrition, to healthcare, to the diseases that are coming back, to the nature of the climate change that's going on, the problems that with the diseases we've not been able to eradicate, because if you look at what we've managed to solve, we've solved point diseases, we haven't solved connected diseases. So things to do with the immune system, things to do with our digestive system, things that are holistic to do with the body. We've made very little progress at, and the only things we make progress on are things we can take a huge shotgun and go at that little ant of a disease and do something about it. Okay? That's what we've done. And as a result, just the possibility I could be living and representing the generation for peak longevity wasn't something that filled me with glee. And that got me really interested in saying, what can I do with technology to solve for that? And it's clear that when we look at many of the problems mankind faces, and going back to sort of, healthcare, disease control, energy, climate change, water, nutrition, even education or government, these are not things that are going to be solved by individuals acting in isolation. It needs people to act in a connected way or form, to learn how to share information together, to learn how to coordinate actions, to be able to do this across culture, across time zone. So much of what I do in my day job, much of what I do, the rest of my, what's left in the day when the day job is done, is focused on trying to solve for that. That's the background. And it's an industry all of you are in. So, it does not matter what role you play. You are part of this environment where the actions that you take can influence and affect our ability as a collective to be able to make sure that that statement I heard isn't going to be true. So, what's happening in this world today that fills me with joy, that makes me get out of bed with a spring in my step rather than saying, woo-wee, I do not want to be told my children won't last as long as I do, right? Let's start with something that the guys at the Deloitte Center for the Edge, John Hagel, John Seeley Brown, and Lang Davison, called the big shift. Okay? The last 60 or 70 years has seen an environment where, due to two principal changes, the public policy shifts that allow for human migration to take place at levels that were never happened before, and the rollout of digital infrastructure to a point at which affordable, ubiquitous connectivity and compute power and storage is in everyone's hands. These changes have taken place not over the last 10 years or over the last 20 years, but really ever since the Second World War. And as a result of those changes, the industrial scene, in some respects, everything is shifting into, at one extreme, high sort of touch and very, very low volume, and at the other extreme, very high volume and very low touch. Some people call this hyper-global and hyper-local. And the industries that are most affected by that are those that have theoretical national boundaries, because national boundaries in a digital world are like intellectual property rights. They need power of state and groups of states to even exist, because they're not natural, they're artificial boundaries to be able to place. They're about as meaningful as region coding on a DVD. Okay? When I was a kid and I had a video, a tape, and I was told, oh, this is PAL, this is CCAM, this is NTSC, and you don't have the right kind of player, and I had format problems, that was okay. To be told that we have taken the analog problems of the past and fossilized them into digital truth. Okay, talk about paving the cow paths, but that's what we do when we try to protect industries that were brought up in that form. But the truth is that the industries didn't have a choice, okay, because we had margin pressure because of competitive intensity, which happens as we moved into this freedom of people to move around, of ideas to move around, and of digital infrastructure becoming affordable. So the effect of that is best explained to me by when I look at the previous impact of something like the internet and the web. People used to give us examples like Encarta versus the Encyclopedia Britannica, and more recently Wikipedia. So you see that we used to have something analog. It was much cheaper, much easier to make that digital. That created a huge business model shift, and after a while that digital became collective. And everyone's understood that, read that, gone to bed with it. The change now is a little more subtle, because it's better described by saying, we have this company called Kodak, brand leader, market leader, dominant, created the idea of the Kodak moment, everything about photography, including all the patents, smartest kids on the block. We also had a company called Polaroid, same story, except instead of photography, it was instant photography. And about 10, 11 months ago, both these companies went to the wall. They finally, got to the last chapter of what America describes as, bankruptcy, because you have chapters of bankruptcy over there, and I don't know how far you have to go before you get to the end of the book, but they got there. Okay? And when they got there, it is normal and expected that companies collapse, industries collapse, because you don't see, that many Farriers or that many Fletchers around today. Industries will have some sort of natural selection, have seasons to live and seasons to die. Right? We've also seen that kind of shift for any of you who read Clayton Christensen through various sections of the Innovator's Dilemma as to how change brings across extinction of one group of people and the power and energy of another. But what happened to these guys becomes important, becomes valuable, because while they were going through that, a company whose core business appeared to be to make Kodak look like Polaroid got bought for $1 billion, Instagram. How the hell was Instagram worth $1 billion? if the people who created the intellectual capital that they used were going to be bankrupt? And the answer is that Kodak and Polaroid knew their product. Instagram knew their customers, and their customers knew their customers. Huge shift, because now the customer is connected to other customers. And a lot of things that we've come through, that I went through in my early life of working, which is to say, bring together, obfuscate and somehow blank out the price at which, imagine all you guys, because one of the things about a group like this is it takes you 10 minutes of talking to each other before you figure out at your own table who's buying and who's selling. Okay? Because that's the sense of a marketplace, There is a buy-sell element, there's a bid, and there's an offer. And when you're in that kind of market, imagine all prices being transparent. Because that's where we're heading. Every time I get on a flight, I can now ask the people in my row, how much did you pay? And take it down and go back to my procurement guys and say, you aren't doing a good enough job, right? Even though in yield management, when you bought it, how you bought it, what else you bought, they're like comparing mobile phones. Anyway, the shift that is taking place, that the guys at Deloitte said, was to do with a movement from stocks to flows. It no longer became important what you did in the past. It is important what you're capable of doing in the future. A Boston professor of mine I have a great deal of respect for said that the business shift that's taking place is that historically, all business has been hierarchy of product and customer, and we're now becoming networks of relationships and capabilities. But we have hundreds, if not thousands of years of experience of how to value product and customer. We have very, very little knowledge of how to value a relationship or capability. For most organizations, you start valuing a capability when the person resigns, because you then want that capability to die before they can join a competitor. You very rarely take that capability and value it while it exists in the firm. Right? You only recognize it by saying, we need to protect and covenant that person from having the right to work in industry until everything they're useful for has been extinguished. So think about that. It's not going to be an easy step as we move forward. When we do move forward, we live in a world where the technology shift that has taken place that allows, when Thomas Watson said, I think there's maybe a market for 5 computers, he meant it. Because he never imagined that everyone would have a mainframe in the home. Homes weren't large enough and mainframes weren't small enough. Right? Ken Olsen had a similar problem, saying he couldn't understand why everyone would want a PC. But PCs then came about. We now live for the first time with a form factor for all this where it is possible for us to think that 8 billion people will be connected. We'll all have access to compute power and storage power and bandwidth. And that changes all the rules, because that size of connected humanity is able to do things that we haven't been able to do before. And those changes because the cost at which you can now capture metadata about an individual's actions become huge. Now, how many of you use Twitter? Okay. Now, when I started using things like Twitter, people looked at me and said, JP, go get a life, Do I really want to know what time you had breakfast, what time you went to the loo, what time anything? And actually, we have to think of our industry differently. Throughout our history, it has been very difficult to capture what a customer does. Most of the time, we captured what a customer does after it had happened. Because a transaction had to take place before you even knew you had a customer. And then you processed that transaction and analyzed it. Past predicts the future. In fact, when I joined the industry, it wasn't called IT. Some people called it DP, some people called it MIS, but everyone called it transaction processing. Right? The machines were called TP, the systems we built were called TP because that's all we did. We processed transactions because it was really expensive to afford these beasts. So no surprise, you had to be a very large organization with the infrastructure to be able to capture transactions. And you couldn't capture intent, you couldn't capture activity, you only capture transactions, post facto. And post facto leads to its own problems. My favorite story about that was a car salesman in Hicksville, USA, and his lot was full of green Ford pickups. A little old lady walks in, wants to buy a white Ford pickup, as little old ladies do in Hicksville, USA. and he doesn't have any, but he's such a great salesman, she leaves with a green Ford pickup. He is such a good salesman before the end of the week, even though every day he calls head office and says, may I please have white Ford pickups? He's such a good salesman, he sells the lot.